What began as just another routine late-night talk show quickly transformed into something entirely different. Everything appeared normal initially. The polished lighting, recognizable theme music, the host's warm smile, and a guest whose television appearances outnumbered most people's home-cooked meals. Nobody expected Jimmy Kimmel Live to resemble a legal proceeding, yet that evening carried an unusual atmosphere. An invisible heaviness permeated the space. An unvoiced tension, the type of pressure that escapes initial detection but settles in your ribcage when silence lingers. Donald Trump materialized on screen via remote connection from Mar-a-Lago, positioned precisely how authority prefers to present itself. Golden drapery formed his backdrop. The flag stood rigid like disciplined sentinels, illumination calibrated to blur every harsh angle. His demeanor radiated ease, assurance, invincibility, the bearing of someone convinced that reality itself adjusts simply because he's arrived. Jimmy Kimmel extended a courteous welcome, the professional approach adopted when millions of eyes are watching. Zero antagonism, no detectable mockery, merely measured interest. The kind that permits the other party to construct their own trap. Throughout the opening minutes, Trump executed his signature performance. He continued speaking endlessly about being perpetually mischaracterized, about facing constant injustice, about society's failure to recognize his exceptional capabilities. His volume intensified as his assertions expanded, accumulating self-commendation upon self-commendation until the delivery seemed scripted. He declared that numerical comprehension eludes others the way it comes to him. He insisted numbers arrive naturally to him without effort. He mentioned solving calculations during sleep. References to Wharton emerged. Discussions of specialists followed. Stories of wealthy individuals addressing him respectfully. Voices heavy with admiration. He constructed an image of someone whose intellect functioned as calculation device, data organizer, and advanced computing system simultaneously. The crowd absorbed his words. Several heads nodded agreement. Polite smiles appeared on some faces. Others displayed physical discomfort, adjusting their positions. Because projecting certainty requires minimal effort, whereas authenticity carries substantial weight, and substance needs time to reveal itself. Trump pressed forward, interweaving his supposed brilliance throughout every statement. Discussions of negotiations, astronomical figures, commercial empires. He suggested calculators serve those lacking mental strength. He positioned his cognitive abilities as superior to machinery, surpassing experts, outpacing everyone present. Jimmy Kimmel refrained from interruption. This restraint signaled something approaching. He remained seated quietly, rhythmically tapping writing instrument against furniture, gaze unwavering, facial expression revealing nothing. He permitted Trump to conclude his exhibition. He allowed the applause to naturally diminish. He maintained patience until every sound evaporated and stillness claimed the space. Then, with apparent casualness and surprising gentleness, he shifted forward. He offered compliments to Trump, acknowledged the impressiveness, stated, "Such mental capacity isn't universal." He concurred that numerical concepts challenge many individuals. His delivery seemed genuine, deferential, nearly admiring, and this established the snare. Because when someone constructs their entire self-concept around being exceptional, the most straightforward inquiry can transform into the most devastating weapon. Jimmy Kimmel smiled and delivered something appearing innocuous, something resembling assistance. An opportunity to silence doubters, a chance to showcase brilliance without dispute. He proposed, "To settle this conclusively, let's conduct a brief verification." The studio atmosphere became still. He avoided economic topics. Fiscal obligations went unmentioned. International relations remained untouched. Nothing politically charged surfaced. He presented elementary school mathematics, asterisk, what does 13 times 4 equal, asterisk. Initially nothing transpired. Trump exhibited no amusement, no response emerged, no reaction occurred, complete stillness. Momentarily, technical difficulties seemed plausible. Perhaps transmission interrupted, perhaps audio malfunctioned, perhaps connectivity issues emerged. Another second elapsed. Then 5 more. The quiet extended. Trump's vision darted laterally. His jaw contracted. His physical bearing altered minimally, just sufficiently to expose unease. Not yet anger, something approximating alarm, the variety that surfaces when preparation vanishes. The audience registered this shift. 15 seconds broadcast live becomes eternal. People's gazes connected. Some leaned closer. Others suspended breathing. The absence of sound generated more impact than any verbal attack. And within that void, something hazardous occurred. The facade began fracturing. Because authority that speaks perpetually cannot withstand silent intervals. Quietness compels reality to surface. And precisely there on that refined late-night platform with countless viewers observing, someone claiming numerical mastery couldn't solve a single problem. Trump eventually vocalized, but not with a solution. And that's where everything transformed. When Donald Trump finally shattered the silence, competence was absent. Clarity didn't emerge. Deflection appeared. His voice returned defensive, hurried, aggravated, like someone attempting to reclaim control of steering already sliding from their grasp. He characterized it as an offensive inquiry. He labeled it disrespectful. He explained his dealings involved billions and trillions, not insignificant values like 13. He accused the program of establishing ambushes. He alleged some variety of deception, some educational methodology specifically engineered to humiliate him. But the audience could detect it. This wasn't genius dismissing something beneath consideration. This was someone captured unprepared, attempting to verbally escape a moment they couldn't mentally navigate. Jimmy Kimmel maintained silence. No arguing occurred. No voice elevation happened. He simply absorbed, and sometimes absorption proves more destructive than assault because it permits the other party to completely expose themselves. Trump continued speaking, constructing explanations upon explanations. He insisted universal awareness of the solution existed. He described it as an excellent number. He refused to articulate it because the question itself lacked fairness. He suggested wealthy individuals shouldn't face elementary mathematics on television. He claimed media constantly attempts humiliation. But something peculiar occurred during his monologue. The longer avoidance persisted, the more apparent it became that the answer wasn't present. Not concealed, not withheld. Absent. The audience began laughing, not because humor had arrived yet, but because discomfort required release. Laughter frequently serves as tension relief when reality contradicts the narrative previously accepted, and the narrative Trump had marketed for years positioned him as intellectually superior to everyone present. Jimmy Kimmel inclined forward slightly. Writing instrument still held, expression calm. No broad smile appeared. No smirk emerged. He appeared almost compassionate, almost tender. And then he stated it. It's 52, Donald. Not loudly, not victoriously, just softly, like an educator correcting a student who neglected their assignment. It's a standard card deck. 52 weeks comprise a year. 13 times 4 equals 52. The studio erupted. The laughter wasn't courteous. It wasn't manufactured. It was immediate, thunderous, unstoppable. People rose to their feet. Applause resonated. Some concealed their mouths. Others shook their heads in amazement. It wasn't malice. It was recognition. The variety that emerges when something everyone sensed finally becomes undeniable. On the display, Trump's complexion altered. His jaw tightened. His eyes constricted. He began speaking over the laughter, insisting audio had failed, insisting mental calculation had occurred, insisting the show was manipulated, insisting media corruption. But none of that retained significance anymore, because for 15 seconds the individual claiming to be a human calculating machine had been voiceless. And silence doesn't deceive. Kimmel casually tossed his pencil onto the desk surface, allowing it to roll slightly before halting. He crafted a small jest about handling trillions yet struggling with playing cards. The audience laughed again, but now the laughter carried something weightier, something more pointed. This transcended mathematics. It concerned truth versus theatrical performance. For years, Trump had perfected the technique of confidence without confirmation. Declare something with sufficient volume, and inquiry ceases. Announce brilliance, and eventually some accept it as reality. But live broadcasting doesn't accommodate repetition. It doesn't pause for manipulation. It disregards previous statements. It only values the present moment. And in that instant, the present was merciless. As the transmission continued, Trump attempted to regain dominance, but power had transferred. The audience no longer gravitated toward him. They withdrew. The mythology had fractured, and fractures tend to expand. Clips of the moment were already being edited while the broadcast continued. Social media platforms prepared descriptions. Internet humor formed in real time. The question, 13-4, began trending, not because complexity existed, but because it revealed something painfully elementary. You can fabricate confidence. You can fabricate authority. You can fabricate intelligence for extended periods. But you cannot fabricate it when someone calmly requests verification, and the evening hadn't concluded yet. Because what followed wasn't noisier. It was quieter and far more destructive. After the laughter finally subsided, something uncommon occurred in the studio. The noise diminished faster than anticipated. The cheering softened. The room didn't maintain volume. It became contemplative, nearly silent. Such moments rarely happen on late-night television. Comedy programs depend on noise, but silence follows truth. Jimmy Kimmel didn't exploit the advantage. He didn't ridicule the failure again. He didn't repeat the joke. He understood something crucial. The revelation had already accomplished its purpose. Anything additional would diminish it. Instead, he reclined in his chair and observed the screen where Donald Trump continued talking, continued explaining, continued defending. Kimmel permitted him to speak. Every additional word amplified the silence. Trump insisted distraction had occurred. He claimed consideration of national security. He stated the show was beneath him. He suggested genuine leaders don't waste time on mathematical questions. But each sentence felt heavier than the previous, like someone excavating deeper into a hole they didn't realize they occupied. Kimmel waited again. Timing becomes a weapon when properly wielded. Then he spoke, carefully selecting his language. He explained this wasn't about multiplication. It wasn't about academic mathematics. It was about the pattern of claiming superiority without supporting evidence. He reminded the audience that intelligence isn't about generating the most volume or repeating the same narrative until it sounds authentic. It's about precision, about correctness when it matters. Trump interrupted, accusing the show of disrespect of being part of dishonest media. The phrase sounded exhausted, overutilized, like protection that had been damaged excessively. Kimmel didn't counter. He didn't need to. He stated something far more dangerous. Confidence without competence is just noise. The audience applauded, not wildly but purposefully. This wasn't humor. It was a declaration, one that resonated beyond the studio boundaries. What made the moment proliferate wasn't the insult, it was the moderation. Online viewers replayed the clip repeatedly. Not for the laugh, but for the pause. That extended stretch where nothing happened, where the answer didn't arrive, where the illusion collapsed on live television. By morning, the internet had transformed the moment into something larger than a joke. Educators shared it. Parents shared it. Students shared it. Not to ridicule, but to illustrate a lesson older than politics. Claiming genius doesn't create one. Headlines didn't scream. They didn't require volume. They simply questioned why someone claiming unparalleled brilliance couldn't answer a third-grade question. Commentators debated whether it was fair, whether it was appropriate, whether it was cruel, but fairness wasn't the issue. Truth had appeared uninvited. Trump responded online hours later, posting that the question was foolish, that everyone knew the answer, and that the show was disgraceful. But something was different this time. The responses didn't dominate the conversation. They pursued it. The clip had already outpaced the spin, late-night hosts replayed it, morning programs discussed it, analysts examined it frame by frame. That frozen moment, the shifting eyes, the silence, became the image people couldn't erase. And then something else emerged. Viewers began identifying connections, other moments, other claims, other instances when numbers, facts, or details had been dismissed instead of answered. The math question wasn't an isolated incident, it was a fracture that revealed a pattern. The louder the claim, the thinner the proof. And as the day progressed, another clip started circulating. Older, quieter, less theatrical, a moment many had forgotten. It showed Trump years earlier making the same kind of boast, the same confidence, the same declaration of unmatched intelligence. And in that clip too, there was a pause. That older clip didn't appear dramatic initially. No studio audience, no laughter track, no late-night desk, just Donald Trump standing at a podium years earlier, confidently explaining something he insisted he understood better than anyone else. Different topic, same tone, same certainty. And once again, when pressed for specifics, the answer never fully materialized. Viewers noticed the pattern immediately. It wasn't about math, it wasn't about policy. It wasn't even about intelligence. It was about performance. Trump didn't debate ideas, he performed authority, he didn't explain facts, he declared dominance. And for years, that performance succeeded. Loud confidence drowned out quiet correction. Repetition replaced evidence. If you stated something often enough, with enough force, it became truth for those who wanted it to be. But live television has a flaw that social media doesn't. You can't edit silence. That 15-second pause on Jimmy Kimmel Live became symbolic. Not because it was humiliating, but because it was humiliating. But because it was human. Everyone struggles sometimes, everyone forgets something. But not everyone builds an identity around being infallible. That was the difference. The moment didn't say this man isn't smart. It said this man cannot survive without the myth. And myths collapse when tested gently. Jimmy Kimmel understood that. He never raised his voice. He never insulted intelligence. He never claimed superiority. He asked one simple question and stepped aside. That restraint is why the clip endured. Trump supporters tried to spin it. They said it was edited. They said the audio glitched. They said the question was unfair. But explanations require credibility, and credibility had already slipped through the silence. Neutral viewers reacted differently. They didn't cheer. They reflected. They asked themselves how often confidence had been mistaken for competence, how often volume had replaced verification. Teachers talked about it in classrooms. Parents talked about it at dinner tables. Students talked about it in comment sections. Not because it was political, but because it was familiar. We've all seen someone who talks their way past responsibility, someone who declares expertise without proof, someone who attacks the question instead of answering it. The math question became a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable. Jimmy Kimmel closed his show that night with a joke, but it landed differently. The laughter felt softer, more thoughtful, like people weren't laughing at Trump anymore. They were laughing at the illusion they had once accepted. By the next week, the clip had been viewed tens of millions of times. It wasn't trending because it was cruel. It was trending because it was calm. In a world addicted to outrage, calm exposure felt radical. Trump moved on, as he always does, to the next grievance, the next insult, the next claim of unfair treatment. But something had shifted. The spell didn't fully work anymore. Because once you see the pause, you can't unsee it. The lesson lingered long after the clip stopped playing. Real intelligence doesn't need to announce itself. Real strength doesn't panic at simple questions. Real leadership doesn't collapse under basic scrutiny. And sometimes the most powerful way to reveal the truth isn't to attack, argue, or shout.